Web Marketing That Works podcast, episode number 3.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
Hello listeners, it's Adam Franklin from the Web Marketing That Works podcast and joined as always by Toby Jenkins. How are you, Toby?
Good, thanks, Ads. Hi, everyone.
So this is the show for people who love marketing on the web. You will be taken behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and we'll look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll confess what's failed and we will reveal the truth about what really works.
This show is brought to you by our new book, Web Marketing That Works, and specifically the bonus templates that go with it. The bonus 33 free templates are available at our website, so please head on over to bluewiremedia.com.au/book.
And the topic for today's show is social media risk management. And there was a situation where a Facebook comment landed a guy in jail for a night. Can you tell us more about that, Tobes?
Yeah, sure. So a Facebook status update was posted. There were 50 comments, of friendly banter, and then one particular comment was sexually explicit and violent. And so what happened with that particular comment was, the Facebook page was being monitored, and there was a plan in place in terms of what needed to happen if something went wrong. So that particular comment was screenshotted for the record, and then escalated through the organisation. So then they were able to deal with it. And ultimately it was referred into legal to the police. The police went and picked this guy up because they'd been looking out for him. And so this guy ended up, as you say, spending a night in jail on the basis of a Facebook comment.
Over what time frame did this occur?
I'd say a really good question. I mean, one of the amazing things was that it was all said and done within 24 hours, really smoothly. No ruffled feathers really. It was escalated to the right people, got to the police took action. So it was all 24 hours. So it's incredibly quick, and hopefully an example of where having a bit of a plan in place really helps to manage what could otherwise be a really potentially volatile situation for a business. What that to me really highlights is that's an extreme case of a Facebook comment landing someone in jail. So therefore, in all of our businesses and hopefully for you listeners, we should be able to manage negative situations really smoothly if that can be done, just by watching and by having a classification process in place. Then it should be a really simple process for us to manage our social media pages.
Tobes, can you talk us through the comment classification system?
Sure. So this is the way that the situation was able to be handled so smoothly. Was basically there were 5 levels of comments, social media comments in place, and they've been classified. So level 1 was a neutral comment, answer to a trivia question, for example, no action required. Level 2 was a positive comment. So really, ideally, this was shared within the organisation or shared again back into the community too. Level 3 was a genuine negative comment. So a genuine customer complaint that needed some further information and further investigation to be followed up. Level 4 then was a negative comment that breached the house rules. So perhaps we can dig into house rules in a bit, Ads, but it might be, a racist remark, for instance. And then level 5 was a negative comment with potential legal ramifications. So, things that might need either threats or serious accusations, potential criminal or legal issues that might arise from a comment of that particular nature. And in that instance, obviously needed to escalate to management and at management's discretion to legal counsel and police.
And Tobes, these house rules, can you talk us through that?
Yeah, so the house rules are how you set expectation with your audience and with your community. You might include in there that this particular page is being monitored from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and therefore, any responses or comments outside of those times will be dealt with in the next sort of business day. There also in there you might say what's unacceptable behaviour. So we don't want racist comments, we don't want sexist comments, we don't want explicit language used, whatever it might be for your circumstance. Those house rules are how you define what's going to be acceptable within your community, and that way you can use those to police commenting and reinforce what is good and what is not acceptable as well. And therefore, it's just really setting that expectation up front that these are how you'd like people to play in your community.
Tobes, do we have any templates that our listeners might be able to download that are relevant to this?
Yeah, we have the corporate social media approval template. It's slightly different. It takes it a step back and gets you to think through, okay, in terms of this post that you're about to launch, what are the possible things that could go wrong? Just basic stuff like, have I spelt this? Is it spelled correctly? Is there something that could be misconstrued? And ultimately, all sorts of things can be misconstrued. There was one example where, we asked what movies someone had been watching, and our audience had been watching, and in that particular instance, someone came back with a clearly pornographic movie, and we were able to ban that according to the house rules in that, or block it and hide it. So that was all fine. But does that sort of make sense, Ads?
Yeah, that does. And I think it's probably worth us putting that 5-level classification into a template for our listeners as well. So maybe we can put that on the to-do list as well.
Yeah, I think that'd be really useful. Really useful. The other thing is, I guess, in terms of social media and the management of it, having in place your social media guidelines and a bit of a risk management plan, so you know what's going to happen with the negative comments and you know what's going to happen in the crisis situation. Having those things in place and then knowing who's in charge of monitoring is one of the most important things you can do. So really, I think that sort of frees you up to spend the time on all the positive stuff that you can accomplish with social media and by involving and engaging your community more and more.
Cool. And some of the tools I certainly know that we choose to use personally that listeners might be interested in include tools like Mention that cover social media mentions of your name or company, Google Alerts, and Hootsuite. And these are all free services as well, which we will link to in the show notes.
Yeah. No, I mean, they're fantastic tools and really important, I think, in terms of getting started. So many people are concerned about what could go on in social media, and fair enough. It's not a matter of if, but when you get a negative comment, but it might just be the initial example of the guy going to jail is such an extreme example of what might happen, but and they're the ones that everyone hears about, really. But having these sorts of things in place means that you can manage it. You can't know exactly what's going to happen, but if you've got it all in place and you know how to handle it, then you've got that peace of mind, I guess, is the main thing, and then you can get on with making it work for you.
Absolutely. And I guess if you're listening and using these tools, we often talk about the Dell Hell example in our presentations that we give. But basically, if you're listening to what's being said about you, using these free tools, you can respond when appropriate and not have problems, blow up out of your, blow up, and then it's a big issue to then deal with. But if you can be listening, using these tools, and also having a plan in place, as Toby's mentioned, about 5 different levels of classification for a comment, then really you can pretty much handle any situation that comes your way on social media, wouldn't you think?
I absolutely think so.
What's the process that you go through when you do discover a malicious or racist or defamatory or offensive style comment on your social media platform?
Look, I guess best practice wise, the most important thing is that you keep a record of it. So taking a screenshot of any negative comment is really important. So then you've got documentation as to what was actually said and how you then responded. So take your screenshot of it first up. Then secondly, you can actually leave a notification to say, because this particular comment was against house rules, we have removed it. A repeated offence will have you blocked, for instance, from this particular Facebook page. So it's does that sort of make sense in terms of initial steps to dealing with it?
Yeah, totally.
So I mean, it's really document it and then respond and let people know in the community that behaviour hasn't been tolerated because it's been in breach of your house rules, means that people will are far more likely to stick with it. And I've actually seen on some blogs particularly where they've said, hey, look, this particular comment is borderline on our house rules. So I'll leave it here, but anything further than this will be removed. And that way, I guess, you're leaving an example there for other people to see and to learn from as well, which can be really a good way of fostering, I guess, the kind of discussion that you want in your community too.
And how about when it's just a negative comment? So it's certainly not breaching or contravening house rules. It's not offensive in any way, but it's just a negative comment in the community.
Look, I mean, I think if they've made a fair negative comment, then it's good to acknowledge it. If they're just, I guess there's that distinction then between sort of a negative comment and someone who's really trying to stir up trouble. And if it's a negative comment, then deal with it appropriately as you would in person is a good rule of thumb. And hopefully with with your customer service hat on. But then if it's someone who's really trying to stir up trouble, who's typically called a troll in these kind of situations, then what you're looking at doing ideally is, you can ultimately block that user if they become someone who just repeatedly bags you or repeatedly makes ridiculous comments on negative comments. If it's unsubstantiated and they just keep harping on as opposed to helping to try to solve the problem, then I think you're within your rights to block those users.
And otherwise, you're entitled just to ignore them and their comments, aren't you? You don't have to reply to them, and in fact, sometimes replying to them just encourages them. So you kind of ignore them and they go away, or you have to block them if in an extreme situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, ignoring them is fine as well. I guess I would err on the side of trying to address a problem first up, but then if you see a repeated, one particular user repeatedly bagging you, then that becomes a bit of a different situation.
Yeah, I guess it depends if it's a genuine person in your community or just a troll, a troublemaker who's scouring the internet, just trying to start fights with whoever happens to retaliate and rise to the bait.
Yeah, totally. To summarise what we've discussed, probably ties back to my last point, which is make sure you've got a process in place for handling negative comments. And if you need to, if your business is big enough, then make sure you've got an escalation process in place as to who's going to be notified when you have a negative comment that needs dealing with. And as I say, again, it's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. And then the other thing is, make sure that you're monitoring. I guess ads probably haven't sort of harped on enough about that, but if you're listening and watching and keeping track of it, then it's those instances where the comments aren't actually addressed that often really spiral out of control. And there's plenty of examples of that with the Del Hell example that you often use, ads, and a whole stack of others out there. And I guess they're probably the horror stories that make up the social media headlines at times in the papers and that sort of thing. But having those things in place and having someone watching means that you're prepared and ready to respond if necessary.
So, Toby, what would you say to the listeners who are, say, for example, a CEO or a corporate marketing manager? They might hear, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you get a negative comment or a crisis comment or a undesirable comment. I can understand their nervousness when they hear that. What advice do you have to those type of people who are sort of on the fence, umming and ahhing about whether or not to go into social media, but they know that something will definitely go wrong eventually?
Yeah, look, great question. My initial advice would be is if start monitoring and being aware and trying to find out what people are saying about you. It's just like business in real life. We all get sideswiped by things that we can never predict. And social media is another, is a highly connected environment. Clearly, that's what it's all about, which, can work enormously in your favor when used well, and needs to be watched and managed like any other part of your business. So if you're tentative about it, then just start watching, I think, is probably my best advice for those that are feeling tentative. If you jump back into the tools that we've just talked about, then set up those, start watching to see what people are saying about you, and then at least you will know if there's a conversation that you need to be a part of.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I like how you said, in real life stuff can go wrong and not according to plan, and that doesn't stop us being in business and marketing our business, but having that plan in place and having your ears open and listening to what is actually happening out there puts you in a very strong position to handle those situations.
Would you have any other advice, do you reckon, Ads?
Look, yeah, my advice, just to build on that, would probably be to understand that there's so many benefits to using social media as a business, whether you're large or small, that yes, sometimes things will go wrong. It's a very small percentage of time. Most of the time, even when things are negative, it's a genuine customer crying out to be heard. And that not only gives you an opportunity to turn that client or that customer into an advocate by delivering great service, but it also draws your attention as the business owner or marketing manager to a particular problem within your company that may need a little bit of extra attention. And you can really nip that in the bud because you're hearing about it quite early on through social media. But just also balancing that up against the whole positive upside that the whole world that this social media opens up to you, business opportunities and increased networks, increased audience, increased ways for people to be spreading your message and to be educating people as well. That, too often we get sidetracked and bogged down with that, less than 1% chance of things going wrong and being blind to the fact that there's 99% upside out there as well. Anything more you'd like to add there, Tobes?
No, not at all, Ads. I think that really covers it.
All right. Thank you. So there we are at the end of another episode. Thank you so much for hanging with us till the end, listeners. Tobes, can you give us a quick summary of that show?
Yeah, sure. So, the focus of it was social media risk management, and I think, looking back at it, Ads, the last 20 minutes, the key thing for me is that if you get your monitoring in place so you can keep an eye on what's going on, if you've got a process in place as well then to handle the event of a negative comment or a crisis even, then that really frees you up to then make the most of the opportunity that is social media, because it's a hugely connected world. There's plenty of people that talk about it and there's plenty of people on it. And having those two things in place will give you the peace of mind that enables you to make the most of the tool, I think. And that to me is whilst risk management gets a bad rap, that to me is the exciting part of getting it in place, so then you don't have to worry about it anymore and you can just focus on the benefit of it.
Now, Tobes, one question I'm often asked is the CEO of an organisation, is the CEO the best person to be responding to negative or crisis comments, in your opinion?
Negative, no. Crisis, absolutely. I think ultimately, it is a team effort. Particularly for bigger organisations. I guess if you're a solopreneur, and you're the man or the woman who makes the call on a negative comment or a crisis comment, then that's great. You're the same person. But in a larger organisation, I think it is worth having the senior members of an executive team weighing into a discussion to show that, particularly if things have got out of hand and it is a crisis situation, that it's being dealt with by the top level of a business. So, yeah, the short answer to that is yes. I think a CEO should be involved with helping to manage the crisis situations.
Okay, thanks for that. And one thing I just wanted to add to the show as well, we did make a reference to the Dell Hell example. So let me just fill the listeners in who aren't familiar with that story. I'll give the short version. Basically, a blogger called Jeff Jarvis bought a Dell laptop online and he didn't get it delivered on time. And when he did finally get it delivered, it was faulty. And he had the premium customer care, but he was still not given the level of service that he would have liked. And because he needed his laptop to do his job, which was blogging, he ended up borrowing his friend's laptop to blog. And he wrote an article about how upset he was with Dell's customer service. Once he hit publish, he was amazed because on that same day he had 253 comments from other Dell customers who were very upset with their level of service and also their product quality. Now, this was many years ago now. They've completely changed their tune and they're very good at it these days. But what happened as a result of this is that other bloggers started blogging about the situation. Journalists were reporting about Dell's poor level of customer care. And at one point, the number one Google result, if you searched for Dell, was this website called Dell Hell, which was a website that Jeff and his blogging friends had put together. And it was basically a forum for Dell customers to vent about Dell's customer service. And the fact that it was number one on Google when you searched for Dell just goes to show how big a problem it had grown into. And in fact, Dell had not even responded by this stage, and it was only when their share price dropped that they realized they had a problem on their hands. And to their credit, their founder, Michael Dell, he had actually retired and he reinstated himself as the CEO to try and put out the fire that had blown up within the company. And in the end, they started a blog and they started listening to their customers through a website called Ideas Storm. But the long and the short of it is that they weren't listening to what was happening online. They missed this opportunity to not only address Jeff's issues, but also to realize that they had a product and a customer care problem within the company, which they could then work on, but they completely missed that opportunity because they weren't listening. And those tools that we spoke about during the show, Mention and also Google Alerts or Hootsuite, they're the sorts of tools which are free that you need to be running so that you can pick up when anybody on the web and anyone in social media talks about your product or your company so that you can actually respond in a timely manner. Because if they'd been listening, that whole situation, the whole fiasco, could have been prevented.
Yeah, it's a pretty brutal case in point, really, isn't it?
Totally.
So we had a question from our audience, from Sean Bowes from Bowes Fitness. So I'll hand over to Sean. We've got the soundbite here.
Oh, hi, Adam and Toby. It's Sean Bowes here from Bowes Fitness. Just got a question about negative comments on your blog and Facebook page, that kind of platform. Do you think it's a good idea to delete those comments and get rid of the negative publicity? Or is it better to maybe leave them there and perhaps, work on the questions that have been raised with you? I'm just interested to see what you guys think. Thanks, guys.
Great question, Sean. I'll take this one if you don't mind, Tobes.
Sure.
I reckon, as a general rule, leave the negative comments or the negative publicity on your page because, one, if it's a genuine concern, then if you leave it on there, it gives you the opportunity to respond to it, which has a number of benefits. One is that you address the person's problem or their concern, and it shows also that as an organisation that you're listening and that you care about your customers. The other reason, or a third reason why I would suggest leaving genuine negative comments on your social media platforms is because when some people look at a page and it's got, say, for example, all positive reviews or all 5-star reviews or all 10 out of 10s, people look at those pages and very often they can't quite put a finger on it, but they don't feel 100% comfortable. It feels like something's a bit off. And I think actually having a negative comment or a handful of negative comments, as well as the genuine, sincere replies to those comments, shows that you are very human and that you're very real. If it's all too good to be true, I think people will start to detect something that isn't quite right, and as a result of that, they won't quite trust you enough. So in short, yes, leave the negative comments on there, reply to them, be sincere, be genuine, and it's only in the situation that it's a troll, so someone out to pick a fight just for the sake of it, or that it's a malicious or defamatory or snarky off-topic comment. They're the times that you would screenshot it and delete it and explain why you've removed it. But for a genuine negative comment, I reckon leave it there. But Sean, thanks for sending in your message. Thanks for listening to the show.
This show was brought to you by Web Marketing That Works, our new book, and specifically the bonus 33 free templates that go with it. So jump on over to bluewiremedia.com.au/book to grab those templates. Our intent is to always deliver actionable advice, so we'd love your feedback, and your questions are more than welcome. So please let us know via email or on Twitter. My email address is toby.jenkins@bluewiremedia.com.au, or on Twitter, I am @Toby_Jenkins. Ads?
Okay, so my email is adam.franklin@bluewiremedia.com.au, and on Twitter @Franklin_Adam. Thanks again for listening to the show. If you did enjoy it, we would certainly love you to leave an honest review on iTunes. We'll give a shout out to those of you who leave a 5-star review and try to link to you from the show notes as well. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks very much, everyone.